why there is the microphone, so that way people who are listening online are able to hear us. So we're congregating around the microphone, which is why I'm having everyone come up here. No, if you guys want to just, yeah, sit up here and then everyone else and got the clicker?
Thank
Is it
you.
working?
Go through a few.
Oh, okay.
So welcome everybody. I'm John Hacker. I'm a volunteer with the National Kidney Foundation of Wisconsin. I'm talking today because I go into a higher pay rate if I talk. So this is part of our Living Donation Information Program series. We have a couple different series of programs like Living Well Before and After Transplant and the Living Donors Together program. So this is Living Donor Information Program. Are you interested in learning more about donation and the transplant process? Are you or a loved one waiting for a kidney transplant? Living Donation Information, I get to read this because I don't do it all the time. The Living Donation Information Program provides a variety of resources, either online or in person, for learning about the transplant process and about becoming a donor. Attending in person can offer an opportunity to talk with others waiting for a transplant or possibly some organ transplant recipients. Both the online and in-person programs are free. Today we're doing a program that's called Behind the Scenes Work, Home, and Life After Living Donation. Allison Stephans is moderating a panel discussion. She's a transplant social worker at Froedtert in the Medical College of Wisconsin. And I don't even know what all those initials after her name stand for. This is to learn about the details of the recovery period after a living kidney donation. We'll discuss how to plan for surgery by discussing the return home, the return to work, financial responsibility, and more. This program is offered in collaboration with Froedtert in the Medical College of Wisconsin. Cindy is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Kidney Foundation of Wisconsin. She's not here today. I was supposed to take this out, but I left it in. So here's Allison, and I think that Allison's program starts right here.
Yep. So welcome all of you guys for coming. I appreciate it, especially coming out in this nice dreary day. And so as John said, I'm a social worker at Froedtert. So one of the jobs that I have is to work with people considering living donation. And so my job is to make sure people have all of the resources they need to be successful with that process. And that goes into looking at a lot of details about your life, so that way we know you can be successful. So I tend to look at all the non-medical things that surgery can be impacted by. Anyone who wants to be a donor sees a lot of different specialists in the evaluation process. Most of the people are looking at from a medical perspective. Oh, wrong way. No. Oh, he has two pictures of me on this. That's why I clicked. So for those of you online, this is what I look like. So one of the things I talk about when I meet people is telling them what to expect if they go through donor surgery. And so some of the things that you would expect to have, would be an average hospital stay is about 3 days. There's always potential to have an extra day or two in the hospital. Obviously, we want to make sure that you are doing well, everything's functioning properly before you leave the hospital. So there's always potential for a little bit of an extra stay, because no one wants to have to come back to the hospital after you leave. So that's really just the beginning of your recovery. So, you know, they're taking a major organ out of your body, so it takes your body some time to adjust to all of that. And so while you're healing, the doctors put you on a couple restrictions, and the lifting restriction is really probably the most challenging piece of that. So people are not allowed to push, pull, lift anything more than 10 pounds for a good 6 weeks. So a month and a half, you're not able to lift anything more than a gallon of milk. So you're going to need help at home because you can't lift grocery bags, laundry baskets, take out the garbage. No, please come in. I'm glad you're able to come. We weren't expecting this big of a crowd, so that's wonderful. And so definitely need help doing some day-to-day activities in the beginning. Also, you're not allowed to drive while you're on pain medication. And so that's for everybody's safety. Everybody's need for medication is very different. So I tell people to plan on 2 weeks without driving. Not everyone needs that full 2 weeks, but there's always a follow-up appointment during that time. So we want people to be prepared to have a chauffeur to that follow-up appointment, as well as any other errands that you're going to be running. So returning to home, kind of a few do's and don'ts. You definitely want to have friends and family available to help you with some of those things while you're first recovering when you go home. And I kind of listed some of these things also. Yeah, no, lifting some crock pots and cast iron pans, so you can do some cooking, but not all of it. You can't mow the lawn, you can't shovel snow, depending on what time of year you're donating. But we do want you up and walking. So we don't want your family waiting on you hand and foot while you're, sitting on the couch or laying in bed. You want to be up and walking. That'll help your recovery. But you want to take it easy within the limits that the doctor gives you and listen to your body. If your body is telling you, you're doing too much, you need to stop. So family life can be impacted depending on what your family structure looks like. So if you have small children, you can't pick them up because there's that 10-pound lifting restriction. So with parents with small children, that could probably be one of the most challenging pieces of it, depending on the age of your children. So you're going to need people to take care of the kids when you're in the hospital, when you're on that lifting restriction. If you've got a small toddler in diapers and they're kicking at you, you're not able to change those diapers. Transporting kids to school and other activities when you're not allowed to drive, just supervision while you need your rest. You're gonna need to limit activities for a few weeks because you're not really many people aren't really feeling up to doing quite their normal routine when they leave the hospital. Not able to take your dogs for a walk either. So that's sometimes things that people don't think about, just that pulling when they're on a leash. So you got to make sure all your pets are taken care of too. So returning to work is a big thing that I address with people because there are some people who think they don't need to take any time off of work, that they can just work from their computer in the hospital or at home, and that's really just not the reality of it. And these lovely panelists here in a little bit will be able to share a little bit about what that's all about. On average, we tell people to plan on 6 to 8 weeks off of work. But that does depend a little bit on what you do. Obviously, you have that 6-week lifting restriction. So if you are doing heavy manual labor through your job, you definitely are going to need 6 to 8 weeks off. If you are sitting at a desk all day, you might be able to return to work a little bit sooner. But again, that's where you have to listen to your body. And depending on what you're doing, if you're on pain medications and things like that, you just want to make sure you're ready to go back to work physically, emotionally, mentally, so that way you're not making mistakes that could cost your job. And so a lot of people ask about the ability to work from home if their employer offers that. Again, it's really, are you on the pain medication, and what's your ability to really function at the level that your employer is going to require of you, and are you able to do that? So with having that time off of work, depending on your job, 4 to 8 weeks, you have to kind of look at how your bills are going to get paid during that time. So you have to look at what your employer offers. Do you have vacation time, sick time, short-term disability benefits? There are a few very rare employers that actually specifically offer 6 weeks paid time off for living donation. Very few do, but that is, state employees get that, federal employees get that, and there are some other agencies that to provide that service. Short-term disability benefits, if you have it, and you need to know what they are, because that differs employer to employer depending on what program offers. Do you have other family that has income to support you during your time off, or savings or assets that'll get you through this time? So those are things that I always talk through with people who are going through the evaluation process, because not everybody thinks about just those functional things. And sometimes I see people who are living paycheck to paycheck that have no paid time off. Well, how are you going to pay your bills when you can't work? I don't know. But we need to figure out a plan before you have surgery then. And so other things would be covering the out-of-pocket expenses related to donation. There's not many of them for the most part. Travel and lodging, depending on where you are coming from. So if you have a loved one who needs a kidney who lives halfway across the country, you have to travel to that transplant center where they're at to get evaluated and have surgery. So when you live further away, those costs can definitely add up. If you're donating to someone in Milwaukee and you live in Milwaukee, those costs are going to be very minimal. There are foundations and programs available to help donors if they're eligible. And so that's something that I share with people when they come in, just to make sure they know what those resources are. There are no costs to the actual evaluation or the surgery itself. Your recipient's insurance covers all of that. So you should never see a bill from the medical perspective. So it's the unpaid time off of work, travel, lodging, and if you need a babysitter or a pet sitter that you need to pay for, some of those expenses that you need to kind of figure in with the logistics. Other life activities, for the most part, we tell donors that you don't need to quit any activities that you're doing. With time, after your recovery, you should be back to your normal routine, except for high impact, intense contact, or high risk activities that might damage your remaining kidney. So, Michelle's laughing at my pictures that I put on here. So yeah, if you're boxing or skydiving, things like that, you just have to know that you're going to be at risk of damaging that one kidney that you have left. So you just have to be aware if you're into extreme sports. So other potential lifestyle changes, I think one of the big things that can impact people is that you are not allowed to have NSAIDs for the rest of your life for pain management. So I have a list on here of the most common medications that you are not able to take if you are a kidney donor lifelong. So you are able to use Tylenol or acetaminophen, but there are people who, depending on other ailments that they may have that cause them pain, this might rule you out if you can't go without NSAIDs, because that is a huge one that you will not be able to donate if you need to use those on a regular basis. Depending on how certain supplements that people take, all natural medications and herbs, that's something you just need to talk with the team about. That would be more of a pharmacist question, not me. But they have that conversation with you during your evaluation. So depending on how you feel, what supplements you might be taking, they may ask you not to take them as a kidney donor. So that's really kind of, I went through all of that stuff really quickly. I go through things much more detailed when I'm meeting with someone individually, but I wanted to have everybody, the panelists, kind of go through and share their experience too, because they're the ones that actually lived all the things that I just talked to you about, so they can share with you firsthand. So before I introduce them though, I wanted just to share some information for anyone who is a living donor, interested in living donation. This is a program in Wisconsin that got started, is it 2 years ago, Michelle?
Correct. Yes.
Oh, look at that.
Last year.
And so Michelle's kind of helped form this group. It's a living donor together group. They meet online. Occasionally you get to meet in person at special activities. So there's information on how you can join the Facebook group, and they're also having an online meeting on November 20th. So all that information is provided. So great way for kidney donors to meet each other and learn from each other's experiences. And so I want to introduce our panelists. So because we're talking about what that recovery looks like, I felt it was really important to get people at different stages of their recovery. So Marty right next to me, he donated in 2017. Jesse just donated earlier this year, and Michelle donated in 2014. And so I'm gonna let them share a little bit about their story and kind of what life has been like for them since they've donated, and open it up to questions for anybody. And before I get started, anyone have any questions for me based on what I talked about? All right. I didn't prepare. Anyone want to start? You want Michelle to start?
You want the old timer to go first, right? I can do that. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Sherman. I donated in August of 2014 at Froedtert, and my recipient is my best friend from high school's father, so a non-relative. And at the time of donation, and I always joke every time I come back, I'm like, do I still hold the record? Because at the time of donation, I was the highest non-relative match percentage that Froedtert had seen in their transplant history. So being a non-relative, we felt pretty confident that our kidneys were going to be compatible, or my kidney would be compatible with my recipient, Mr. Hanusa. And 5 years later, it is. He's doing wonderful and feeling great and doing really well. So I thought I would just go through a couple of the stages as we talked about what's life like right after donation. And then I'm looking at like a year post, and then now 5 years later. So I feel my experience after donation was very much mirrored what Froedtert told me to expect. There would be milestones, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. And I pretty much followed their guidelines and their, the things that they told me to expect pretty much to a T. I did not have any major complications in surgery other than the normal pain and things that they explained in the evaluation. That was pretty much what I experienced. I left the hospital. I was able to leave 2 days after surgery, donated on a Wednesday, was able to leave the hospital on a Friday, and I opted to stay until Saturday because one of the things we knew going into surgery is that I'm allergic to a lot of medication. So in addition to not being able to have the NSAIDs, I knew that I was allergic to oxycodone, hydrocodone, and now a few other things I'm allergic to. And I didn't learn that until I was in recovery and realized, oh, this isn't working for me. And so the team was working to find pain meds that met my preferences, right? So other than that, it was pretty much on schedule. So I went home on Saturday, and for me, in that first I stayed off of work for 6 weeks, and I felt, if you want to say back to normal, at about 4 weeks. I was able to resume activities and what I felt like my normal day-to-day life at 4 weeks. And then I did take those extra 2 weeks, and mentally was really good for me to be able to just recover, take that extra time before I went back to work. It was still slow going, and I wasn't jumping out of airplanes like I did before transplant, because that was the one thing on my bucket list that I said, oh, if I can't ever jump out of an airplane, I better do it now. So my transplant coordinator at the time was thrilled when she found out after the fact that I had just jumped out of a plane a couple weeks before donation. I was like, it's okay. You would have had multiple organs to donate if something would have went wrong. And yeah, so anyways, with that being said, the other fun part is my recipient he is a veteran. He worked for the FAA and is currently a consultant in the aviation business. So he just thought it was the most bizarre thing that I would want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. And now he has that kidney inside of him. So it's how it all comes full circle. But anyways, I went back to work at 6 weeks, just being cautious and careful. And you become on high alert to your body, just like my transplant recipient was, right? Always aware of every little thing and following the rules and making sure that I was paying attention to the signs that were going on in my body, drinking my water, and always going to the doctor to get my checkups. And I have actually had my labs drawn at a minimum of twice a year, just because for my own peace of mind, I pay that extra to have my labs drawn and make sure all my levels are good. But also because I did have some minor concerns as we've moved through these last 5 years. Part of it is my age. I'm now in my mid 40s, and bodies change, right, in our 40s. So it's always that piece of, is it the perimenopausal stuff, or is this related to the kidney? So I think for me, it was always just having that peace of mind that everything was okay as my body is changing. So the piece post-surgery, I did have some bloat. I retained a lot of water in my stomach. So I almost felt like I was like 3 to 6 months pregnant with my second kid for about a year after donation. And I was like, what is this? Like, I don't know what this bloat is. And every time I'd go get checked, they're like, it's fine, it's normal, that will subside. And it did over time. It was just, and nobody really knew why. Again, was it my age or was it the donation? It was just something that my body experienced. So that has subsided. No more issues there. I have, my incisions are all on my right side. So the other fun thing too is you go into surgery and they anticipate your anatomy being one way based off of all of the tests they do. And so I went into surgery feeling like I'd get the question mark scar around my belly, and I came out with everything on the right side. So at some point on the table, they said, we don't want to go that way, we're doing something else. And so my recovery was a little bit different. I've heard others say like, oh, I'm out walking around, it was really easy. Well, since everything for me was isolated on the right side with almost like a C-section incision in my lower stomach, and then 3 holes for all the instruments, and I guess my liver is really big, so I got a bonus incision to be able to hold up my liver. So I was like, I hope that's a good thing, because now I'm taking Tylenol. Like, it all works out right. So I did have a little more restriction in movement. Now that I'm 5 years post, I'm meeting more donors and talking about the differences and everyone's scars, right? We all compare the scars and our recovery. I just feel I had a little bit more restriction based off of where my incisions were, but
you still felt back to normal within a month.
Within a month, right? So exactly right. It's no issues with it. It just it seems like those that may have had more central incisions that I've talked to have had easier mobility than I did. I also, and I was talking to Allison about this over the years, I get this cramp right here, and like it's almost right where my small little liver incision is. I just get a cramp, and I don't know why. And I still don't know why. And it comes and it goes. It hasn't happened in months. I mean, it could be like a year since I've talked with you.
It's been a while.
It's been a really long time. It hasn't happened. I've talked to my primary about it, and I don't know. It didn't happen pre-kidney donation, but it's just like this pulsing pain right here, and it's not related to anything else. It's not like heartburn, or I have all those other things that I manage and recognize the signs, but this is very different. And so again, that piece where after donation, I'm just more aware of my body and what's happening, where maybe I had that pain my whole life, and I didn't realize it the same way as I I do now. So 5 years post-donation, I'm feeling great. I feel fabulous. So thankful that I made this decision to be able to give the gift of life to Mr. Hanusa. The biggest piece is now that you continue to manage, and I am a peer-to-peer mentor with Froedtert through their living donor program, and have the opportunity to connect with living donors who are considering sharing that gift or giving that gift of life. And I always talk about the NSAIDs, and that is a big piece, especially as, again, I'm in my mid-40s. Carpal tunnel, you can't take an Advil for that. Any sort of menstrual women's issues, you're needing to find other alternatives for that. I had a emergency tooth surgery, and I was in immense pain. And every doctor I talked to was like, oh, wait, I'll give you these 10 medicines. Oh, wait, you can't take any of those, and we need to look for alternatives. So there's definitely that piece of the medicine or medical management that you have to consider. There are alternatives and there are ways to manage that. You just have to be willing to explore those options and potentially live with a little bit of pain, because there was like 3 days where I'm like, this can't last. And I was trying multiple things and nothing's working. And then finally we figured out a solution, but we did have to maneuver through some of that. The other piece is I also decided this past July to have a endometrial ablation done to manage some of the menstrual issues. Sorry guys in the room. Some of my menstrual bloating and issues that I've been having as I age. And some of those symptoms might have been able to be alleviated with an NSAID. So the cramping and some of the extreme issues that I was feeling, sure, maybe it would have been different and wouldn't have been so intense for me if I would have been able to pop an ibuprofen or an Advil. But for me, then looking at alternatives, I decided the surgical route to have the ablation done. And it's kind of the same thing with the tooth. It was like, well, you could take all of these things for pain meds, and oh no, I can't. And not always, in this case, for example, the Tylenol 3s did not work at all. So I was suffering in what I felt was like 8 hours of intense labor, no relief, no 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off. And when I called my doctor, he said, just take an 800 milligram of ibuprofen. And I was like, see, there's very few options when you're in that point that my doctors have recommended. Every doctor that I've seen for anything is like, just take an ibuprofen, you'll be fine. So again, there's that misconception in the community. So there's things that we as living donors have to advocate for ourselves for, and continue to search for those options. And part of that, the work that we do, or that I'm committed to doing, is to share back with my transplant team and with the transplant centers in the state some of those challenges that we endure, because then this is how the medical community can get better and support all of us living donors. The other thing too is living donors aren't always a code when you go to the doctor, right? No. So I get asked all the time about my kidney disease and what stage my kidney disease is. And I was like, oh, wait, what's in my labs? Like, what's going on, you know? So there is that advocacy and that understanding that we need to share in the medical community as well. And there's different tests that they run. And I'm in a variety of support groups or Facebook groups. And it seems like transplant centers across the country look at different measures for kidney health. So people will talk about creatinine versus your GFR, because we don't do that. My doctors don't do the GFR. I have a new primary care, and a funny story is her husband is a kidney recipient and her brother is the living donor. And I just by chance happened to connect with her. What are the odds of that? So anyways, she's a fabulous resource, but she looks at other measures than what I have been consistently looking at with my other primary cares. So again, it's just trying to understand it all and remain educated in the healthcare community. And You told me to tell like all the fun stuff, so I'm just giving all the fun things. You never know what's related to the donation or not. I drink a ton of water every single day, which is important to do. And I drink it out of a straw because I drink it faster and more of it if I drink it through a straw. I am now getting lines and wrinkles, ladies, around my lip line. And I don't smoke. And everyone's like, that's because you drink a ton of water out of a straw. It's like the smoker thing that they say happens. And I'm like, is that related? Or is it just because, Amanda, I'm almost 45 and that's just what happens? I don't know. But I try to drink more water out of a cup versus out of the straw. But as you see, when I'm driving, this is what I grab. So there's that piece. And my creatinine is the lowest it's been in 5 years, other than 2 weeks post-donation. So I'm drinking enough water. So I'll take the lines and wrinkles to make sure that I'm getting my water consumption in. And then as a living donor, our blood pressure is always, I shouldn't say my blood pressure. It sounds like that may be standard, that your blood pressure elevates a little after donation. So I always get concerns, like people are, they see that and they freak out right away. And I was like, oh wait, I'm a living donor, don't have kidney disease. Like, go back to the charts. But my blood pressure it's been super low this past year, lower than it's ever been since donation. So I feel really good. With all of that, I feel great. And I would do it again.
Well, thank you. Anyone else? Who wants to go next?
I can go ahead, sure. So I am a mom of 2. Oh, let me start. So my donation is was for my really good friend, Michelle, who's here today. We actually participated in a paired exchange program here at Froedtert. So she needed a kidney and I went through all the tests and I was not a match for her, but I ended up being a match for somebody else, and that somebody else had a friend that was a match for Michelle. So we were able to do a paired exchange with only 4 of us and locally here at Froedtert. And so it's really pretty crazy and cool the way it all worked out. And we had our surgery July 24th. So it's, 3 months. So seems not that long ago, and it's not, but on the other hand, it seems like it's been forever ago. So, I'm doing great. She's doing great. And the 2 other ladies are doing great as well. We all met, about a month after the surgery. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But, I'm a mom of 2. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I'm a kindergarten teacher. So I have a pretty active, busy lifestyle. I'm 32. I was 31 when I had the surgery. Going into it, I was my chart was pretty empty. Like my medical chart, I literally just had 2 babies and that was it. Like that's all that was on my chart. And so, which was great. And the doctors were all like, okay, we don't have anything else to talk to you about because you have no medical history, which was great. But also going into it, it was a little bit scary because I'd never had any other surgery before. So part of me just kind of went into it not knowing what to expect, and also just knowing that this is what I wanted to do to help my friend. So besides being like a mom and a teacher, I have a somewhat active lifestyle, but nothing over the top. Like I started like 3 years ago, I run 1 5K a month with my sister-in-law just for something for us to do. Now, when I say I run a 5K, I'm not like a speed demon. It's, like a 10-minute pace. So it takes me about a half hour to run this 5K. But the point is, like, I'm somewhat active, but again, not over the top, because I do think that matters for people to know that I'm, you can just kind of be right down the middle. I attend like an exercise class 1 day a month. So again, going into it, I was pretty active and somewhat healthy, decent nutrition going into it. So all of that I feel, helped me recover pretty quick, I think. But so I had the surgery on a Wednesday, and I was walking in the hospital 5 hours later. My nurse said, do you want to go for a walk? And I said, can I? Sure, let's do it. So I did it because everybody said, like, make sure you walk. So I was up walking, and it was fine. I have a pretty high pain tolerance, I've realized. So in the hospital, I didn't have any pain meds. Like I just had the regular, whatever you could have, like not the high dose stuff.
Not the narcotics.
Yeah, thank you, not the narcotics. So I just had just the regular pain meds and was fine with that. Was walking pretty regularly, met up with Michelle and we took a walk together in the hospital, had the surgery on a Wednesday, was released on a Friday. I wasn't sure that they were going to let me go home on that Friday because I did have a few issues with like my bladder. I was urinating, but my bladder was still pretty full. And so then I was thinking I'd have to stay. They ended up cathing me and everything worked out. And then they came and they said, okay, you can go. So I took advantage of that. I was released on a Friday. I actually went to the county fair that Sunday to see my daughter. So I did ask permission beforehand because I wanted to know. And the doctor said it would be fine if I was feeling okay. So I went to the county fair because my daughter was showing pigs, and the county fair for me is a really big deal. So I'm a past fair participant, and this is kind of funny. Just because of the surgery fell the week of county fair, and everybody that found out I was doing this was like, "You're not going to be at the fair?" I said, and so I went Tuesday night to the fair. And then Sunday, it's the least one I've ever gone. But so you can see my dedication to being doing it. But no, so it was important for me to go. And if I was able to go, I wanted to. And I did. And my husband got me a wheelchair and everybody pushed me around and all was fine. So I went, but it's not like I was walking around. We stayed for a little bit and, I got a ride around. So some of the things post-surgery, I had my incision goes this way, and then I have, a little spot here and a little spot here. It was laparoscopic. I remember being in the hospital and just like when they finally took the bandages off and I looked and I was like, oh my God, where's my belly button? Because they went right through my belly button and I wasn't expecting that. I knew they were going to make an incision, but I thought it would be like over here. And so I was like, where's my belly button? It's gone. It's missing. So, it was kind of just like a funny joke. Like, I don't know where my belly button is. It ended up healing and all is okay with my belly button. I found it. I at one point, like, as your incisions heal and everything, like stuff comes out and all that fun stuff. And a big chunk came out. And then I was like, look there, found my belly button. So belly button is good, everybody. But it was just kind of my funny little moment where I thought like, oh, that was a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting to look down and notice that I had this big old incision. My abdomen area was sore. That was like the biggest thing. It almost just felt like you would exercise and do too many like sit-ups or something. And it was just sore. I had bloating, like Michelle, but only for a few weeks. And then that kind of subsided, but it was just kind of this dull, sore pain in my abdomen. But nothing where I felt like I needed anything stronger medicine wise. I left the hospital with just the Tylenol that I was taking there and some of the other just regular pain meds, the non-narcotics. And I took those for the first few weeks and then just kind of stopped because I thought I didn't really need them anymore. So week 1, I rested at home. I had a great support system. We had a new puppy at our house at the time. So my parents took the puppy to their house, and then my mother-in-law took the kids every day. So I was basically home for a whole week with just me and our older dog just hanging out on our deck. I got to read in the sun, which was just fine with me. With being a kindergarten teacher, we're doing this in the summer was my preference because then I didn't have to take time off of work. And it worked out great. So I didn't miss any work with the recovery, and the other recipients needed it as soon as possible as well. So the timing was fine. So yeah, week 1, I basically just rested and hung out. By week 2, I was driving because I felt fine and I wasn't taking any of those pain meds. I was taking walks. Week 2, we had a camping trip. We camp regularly. So we had a camping trip scheduled and I was feeling fine. So I did that. So basically by my second week, I was feeling pretty much back to normal-ish. I continued the lifting restriction. Like I did not lift my son. That was hard because he wanted me to, but I did not. I didn't lift, like grocery shopping. I had somebody come with the laundry. My husband helped with that. So I did follow even though I was feeling good, I did still follow the restrictions and the rules. And took it easy, but I also felt like, I wanted to make sure I was still getting out and taking walks and things like that and still being somewhat active with my kids. They were really great through the whole thing and were great helpers and understood, what was what. Week 3, another camping trip, and the walks became longer. I could kind of last a little bit longer. So week 4, if you jump back to the beginning of surgery, how I said I run 1 5K per month. So I ran my July 5K like the week before surgery, and I signed up for my August 5K because I thought if I can do it, 4 weeks out is the end of August. So I did run a 5K at week 4 after donating, and I had like an 11-minute pace, which I was happy about because I was a little bit nervous, thinking not that I wasn't going to do the surgery, but just I didn't think about that. Like I remember my husband and I being in the pre-op appointments and stuff, and he looked at me and he was like, well, yeah, you can't run, like you can't do your 5Ks, you can't do your other stuff, because for me that's my getaway for my kids. So he said, you can't do that, and I was like, what do you mean? And then it kind of clicked, and I thought, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. So the fact that I was still able to follow my 1 a month 5K was kind of important to me, and I just felt good that I accomplished it. So I was really happy about that. By week 5, I was back to school for our professional development week of meetings. So I was able to go to work, but it was strictly meetings. I wasn't with kids yet. And then that 6-week mark was back to school time. So I did start back to school at the first day of school like normal. I felt pretty good. I was definitely tired by the end of the day, but that's also just back to school normal. And then that week, the 7th week, the week after the first week back to school, I did start going back to my like exercise class every week. So honestly, like it's October now, it's almost November. I kind of thought back like the beginning of October, I really truly felt like I was completely back to normal. The month of September, like each month, the month of August was fine. Like obviously there were things going on, like I felt bloated, I had soreness in my abdomen and stuff, but each week I felt a little bit better. Like each week you're like, oh yeah, that is a little bit easier and that's not as big of a deal. September was just as better. And then obviously now being in October, I just was kind of reflecting the other day thinking like, I feel like myself. I feel like my clothes fit good. Like I'm not so bloated and nothing is sore. I can lift, I can push, I can pull. I'm not super tired. So for me, I'm going to say that my process has been really smooth. And I tell everybody if I could do it again, I definitely would. That's not to say that everybody would have the same, outcome and things happen, but I feel good and I feel like there was no problem. The biggest thing too with drinking all the water, like that's a big thing for me. Like when I was home in August, it was a lot easier. Obviously being back at school, it's a little bit more difficult. Also having 2 kids, and as I get older, all the water that comes in has to go out. So it's like sometimes I really have to plan that out. Thankfully, in my kindergarten classroom, we have a bathroom, so I can just hang on, kids. But yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things for myself to remember is to just constantly drink all that water. Michelle and I will talk, and she always says, I'm like, oh, I'm worried about like if I'm eating such and such, and she's like, honestly, just make sure you always drink lots of water. And so I kind of keep that in the back of my mind. I haven't run into any situations where I wish I could be taking an NSAID yet. I mean, I'm sure it will come. Overall, I'm like somewhat healthy as far as like colds and illnesses and sicknesses like that, where I never really had to take them. But I have our list on the medicine cap, like on the door, so that I make sure I cross-check in case I run into anything. But I'm sure something will come up and then I'll have to cross that bridge when I get there. So overall, yes, the experience has been wonderful. Froedtert prepared me really well. All of the tests and the blood draws and all the meetings and everything you go through prior to really was fine because it all prepared me and I kind of knew what to expect. I had actually emailed Michelle and she gave me a lot of great information too. So I'd say Froedtert did a great job preparing you prior to. My stay in the hospital was great. The nurses were wonderful. The doctors were fantastic. I had no issues or concerns. So yeah, everything went fantastic. So yeah, and I'm happy to share my story. So
Thank you.
I'm Marty. I donated in December 2017. I was 47 at the time. I'm a custodian for a middle school down in Kenosha. I donated to the husband of a teacher from that school. So he's doing great. He has the same numbers, same creatinine numbers as I do now. So,
Yay.
so going through the process of getting the 12-hour day of getting tests and 30 vials of blood taken out. It seems
So
like
many vials of blood. They always want your blood. Always.
you have the IV in all day pretty much. But the one thing they do check is the kidney size. They tend to take the smaller one if and give that to the recipient. Mine was the left one that was just a little bit smaller. And they want to take the left one because it's by itself. It's not behind the liver like Michelle's. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. But my hospital stay was 4 days. I left on Sunday morning. Had the surgery on Wednesday, just like everybody else. Left on
When they
Sunday
schedule them.
Yeah. 5 o'clock in the morning. One thing they do, they give you a nerve block on your abdomen, and it's the weirdest thing because you're laying down, and they give you these 3 shots. They tell you to sit up, and you can't sit up. You're stuck on your back. They have to help you up. It's the weirdest.
I started laughing during my nerve block, and then I was like, I'm sorry, like, is that going to affect where you're sticking everything? Because somebody made a joke and I'm laughing, so your belly's jiggling. Yeah, the nerve block was weird.
It was weird, yeah. Because you just can't sit up. You can't move. It's amazing. But so the surgery went great. I didn't walk the first day. I stood up and they wanted to see if I could walk, and I couldn't walk. I got dizzy, so I sat back down, and they said I was probably just dehydrated from the surgery and everything. So my recipient came in. He was walking the hallways that night. Not me, though. So, but those 4 days were great. I slowly walked and did laps around the recovery, the 4th floor. That was fine. One of the big pains that I had was the gas pain, because they used gas to kind of expand your abdomen so they can get access to everything. Well, that gas goes up and sticks in your shoulders, and it's like someone poking your shoulder all day long. And the pain meds don't seem to help that at all. So, but like I said, I'm a custodian, so my doctor immediately gave me the 8 weeks, no restriction automatically. So I didn't go back for 8 weeks. I started about week 2 or 2.5, 3. I started going to the mall and walking. And I went with my mom, who was 70 at the time, and I had to tell her to slow down because I was getting fatigued. So we got to take a rest. I can't do this. So it slowly got better and better. I went to my appointments, my 2 weeks and my 6-month appointments. Everything was fine. It slowly came back. I had a lot of fatigue for a while there. My first week back, I didn't do a lot at work. I did my basic job, the cleaning, minimal cleaning and taking out garbage, that kind of stuff. But it slowly got better as I went and kept trying to keep my exercise up, just walking pretty much, just to try to get the fatigue to go away. But what else? My incisions are just like hers, around the belly button and 2 on the sides here. They would itch every once in a while. Even a couple weeks after, kind of like a phantom pain, like there was like an itching there that there's no, it wasn't by the incisions, but it was just kind of in between the incisions and in your belly button. But that went away. I think I stopped taking pain meds at 2 or 3 weeks or so. I slowly weaned my way off them. And I think I started driving at 4 or 5. And one thing that happened with the staff of that school, they did a meal train, so they would come twice a week and drop meals off. And my buddies shoveled our driveway for us. because it was the middle of winter. It snowed a couple times. So, but besides that, everything went really great. I would do it again in a minute. And like I said, Corey's doing great. He's slowly getting taken off of his rejection drugs or his medications that he has to take every day. So that's promising. So we were a pretty good match. I'm not sure how far off the match we were, but we found out around Thanksgiving, the week after Thanksgiving, and she found out at school. That was the weird thing. My coordinator called me and said, "Hey, you're a match for them. Do you still want to donate?" They ask you if you want to donate 50 or 60 times.
And they make
process.
like, you have to, sorry to interrupt, but at the meeting, it's funny, like my husband came with, I don't know if anyone came with you guys, but they'd always say, to my husband, you need to leave the room. And then they'd ask me, are you sure you want to donate? Is anybody forcing you to donate? Like, it was just kind of funny. Yeah, every person you saw, are you sure you want to donate? Are you being forced to donate?
Yeah, and so that my coordinator called me and said, you're a match. Do you still want to donate? And I said, yes. And she said, do you want to tell them? And I had not told them that I was getting tested because she didn't want to worry about that while she was at school. So we didn't talk about it at all. So she didn't know I was getting tested. So I said, no, I don't want to, the custodian call you at 8 o'clock at night and say, hey, guess what? I got a kidney for you. So I said, no, you call them. But they didn't answer their phone that night. So she had to call them the next day. And then she found out at school and stuff. So that was a pretty different day at school. So, but yeah, that's about it, I think.
Well, thank you guys all for sharing.
Yeah.
Just after hearing all of those very different stories, anyone have any questions for any of us?
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for all three. And by the way, you all did a nice job of explaining, the whole process and everything. And I just think it's just wonderful what you've done. It seems as though that everybody had a target recipient. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I think it was Jesse. You said that you weren't compatible.
Yep. So I got tested for Michelle, and I was not a match for her. But when you go through the beginning process of being tested and everything, they asked me if I would participate in the paired exchange program. And at the time I said, yes, sure. In my head though, thinking like, if I just figured I was going to be a match. I just had this feeling in my head, I'm going to be a match, and I didn't care. But at the time I said yes to the paired exchange, but thinking there's no way a paired exchange is going to work because that can get really messy. You can have lots of different people and it can be all different states. And I thought Michelle really needs a kidney. And by the time a paired exchange match would happen, like it'd probably be easier for her to get a direct match. So yes, I'd participate, but also thinking like, it's not going to get to that. There's going to be somebody sooner. So when my coordinator called to say, I'm so sorry, you're not a match. I was walking in the hallway at school and I just was like devastated. But then she said, but you are a match for somebody else, and that somebody else has a match for Michelle. And I was like, so this is the next best thing. And she's like, this is the next best thing. So I think that the coordinators here at Froedtert kind of knew our numbers and what was going on because they had that match pretty quick. So, and I don't know, like I said, there was only 4 of us involved, and it's not always as such a small group, and sometimes it's out of state. So for us, the paired exchange was pretty flawless.
Yeah, if one person gets sick, then no, everybody's surgeries get canceled.
Or one
Right.
person
Backs out or
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot riding on it. And so the fact that there was only 4 of us was great, but also still, a really big thing. So, and we found out in like the end of May that this was going to happen. And then we couldn't get in for surgery until like the end of July. So that was a long time for anybody, of course.
Yeah.
It's a long time to sit and wait, but then to have, a couple other people involved.
Well, then for the other 2 participants, then for Marty and Michelle, if you wouldn't have, you both matched for your target
Yes.
Recipient. What if you wouldn't have matched for that target recipient? Would you have still participated?
Yeah, I probably would have done the paired exchange.
Same for me as well. At that point, I was invested in wanting to, I felt I had made an educated decision to move forward with this regardless.
And I will say, when we evaluate people, every donor has a choice. There are some people who are very, I guess, I want to directly donate, and if I can't directly donate, I'm not going to donate at all. And that is their right, and we honor those wishes. But there are also people who do come forward with no donor in mind or no recipient in mind and say, you know what, I just want to help someone. You tell me who's a good match for me, and if I'm a match, if I'm a donor.
Well, if you're a
Whatever.
donor, you'll be a match for somebody. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, so you just have to
nobody's
go
not a
through the
match for nobody. I
process.
mean, you just, like,
and-
sorry, you're not a match for anybody.
Right.
that's
So you just
living
have to
on-
be
on Earth
approved.
right
You know,
now.
they have to go through all of the tests and make sure that you're healthy enough to donate. And they will find a match for you.
And the interesting part is all three of us gave to non-relatives. There was some criticism both by family and friends or complete strangers. Like, you're making a choice to put your life at risk, X, Y, and Z risks for somebody that's not even your family. That was a huge, I would say, concern for others. And it wasn't for me, as this is my best friend's father. I often joke with him, I'm like, you remember me with like big hair in the 90s? Like, this is the kidney you're getting, right? And, but I do think that was definitely a concern for other people. Or what if somebody in our family down the road needs a kidney? Well, again, we've done those screens. I've considered the kidney risk and kidney disease in my family, and there isn't any, tracing back for generations. The other thing too is all of us have kids. You're doing this. What if your kid needs a kidney at some point? And my response was, at that point, or if I would need a kidney, right? Just at that point, that hopefully someone would be motivated and inspired by the act that I have done to be able to share that gift with my child. So
That's a really good point.
I mean, living for the future, living for the now, I made that decision and put my faith in the medical community and in the research that has been done. So, but I would say there was a lot of concern by others because it was a non-relative. Everybody I've met that it's a relative, it's like no brainer for sure.
Yeah, I had this. There was a couple people too that had the same concern, and I kind of was like, I'm doing this. Like, there's just no thought. Like, this is I'm meant to do this, and if something else happens to somebody else in my life, somebody else is meant to help them. Like, this is just how it's supposed to be. But that's a really good point, because you're going to come across that, and you have to be aware and be prepared on how to answer that, or your feelings, and some of them are really good thoughts, like, what if my kid needs something, or what if something happens to me on the table, so.
How hard was it for you to approach your significant other and let them know you're going to do that? Was that a challenge for you, or they just know your determination and knew that you were going to do it?
Yeah. For my husband, I think he probably just knew it was like, we were friends because of our husbands. That's how we met. So actually looking back, they worked together. And so I really, as I said to Michelle, there was a bigger purpose for them to meet and be on the same work crew, and for us to become friends. And it's this. So my husband was completely on board. So.
The same for me. My husband was super supportive. One of the reasons he married me is you're a fighter and you're going to make a difference in the work that you do. I think the hardest conversation I had was with my mother.
Yeah.
She's like, I love you dearly, but what? What are you doing?
Yeah.
It's super supportive, but just my husband had been with me through the consideration and the testing at a much deeper level than my mom. So just to be able to bring her into the conversation and the decision. And also, I have to just give unbelievable props to Froedtert for, and I always get choked up when I say this, because my kids in this were so important to me, and they did such a fabulous job of helping me and helping my kids feel safe in what their mom was about to go through. So meeting the doctors and meeting the teams and coming in and seeing the facility, they had great suggestions on how to prepare my family for this. And my girls were, they everybody was scared, right? Because you're going in for an elective surgery. There's risk in that, but my kids were prepared. And so I thank you guys for the work that you do each and every day to put me at ease that I could do this and save somebody's life and know that my kids were educated.
They had a really cool book. Like I got that as there's a really cool book. It literally, the title is My Mom is Donating Her Kidney. And so it's having surgery. Yeah. And it was phenomenal because I hadn't told my kids about it until literally the week before, because my daughter is a worrywart and I thought I'm not going to worry her. She already has the pig show coming up, not going to worry her about the surgery. Her response when I did tell her, who's going to take us to the fair? Like, who's going to take me to the fair? But that book was amazing because it literally laid out everything, and it was just such a cool tool to have, and it was just very easy. So,
yeah, my wife was fine with it. We had a family friend who received a kidney from a living donor probably 4 years before I donated, so that kind of motivated me to do this. So she was on board from the beginning.
I will say, once you tell your story about donating, so many more people come to you and say, like, I know someone who donated, or I have a connection to somebody that received something, or there's just so many stories that popped up after my story was told and was shared. And I was like, wow, that's great. Like, everybody should know about that. So,
and that's why the Living Donors Together of Wisconsin group started. It was, there's certain support groups and mechanisms in place for recipients post-transplant because they need additional levels of medical care. And for living donors, they're kind of like, you guys did great. UNOS follows you. Here's your pillow. Go live your life, because we do. Many of us we live our lives with not a lot of change. And so that Living Donors Together of Wisconsin group was started so that living donors could gather, caregivers and friends could gather to advocate and educate and share stories and feel that there's that social support community. So if you or someone you know is a living donor, please have them connect to that group, because we're 149 members strong, and it's great to be able to see Marty out in the community at a walk, or I was at a ball game and I saw another living donor. I'm like, hey, I know you. So it's really great to have that network as well.
So John kind of quickly went through all the other slides. We're kind of.
I thought I had one on the living donor support.
Well, I already had it up. And so, but we are kind of wrapping up. Was there anyone online that had any questions?
No.
Okay. So thank you guys all for coming. I know I am willing to stay and answer any questions that those of you who are here have. I'm sure everyone else can be more than happy to answer any other questions that you guys have too.
Awesome.
So
thank
you all for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to do these slides a little bit slower.
Oh, okay.
So,
Coughing, laughing, and sneezing are
Yes.
the most painful things on the
Mhm.
planet.
It's
After
true.
surgery.
It is true. My 4-year-old started making me giggle doing something silly, like I think a week out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, don't make me laugh. And so my husband's like, okay, you guys don't make mom laugh. And so then what does my little guy do? He comes over and he says like the stupidest joke to make me laugh on purpose. And then I laugh more because he's just being silly. And but yes, laughing was hard.
Yeah.
Did y'all have laparoscopic, or was it more invasive?
Laparoscopic.
Yep, same.
Do anybody that had it the other way that it was a lot harder? I heard it was a lot harder.
It is, and they very rarely do that anymore because of that. So I have heard that there are a few times where people have not been able to do the laparoscopic surgery, but it's very rare.
When
now.
do they know? Do they know when you're on a table, or they know beforehand?
I'm not the right person to ask that question as the social worker. Sorry.
They do tell you that they have to. They will.
Yeah, that was told. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They will make a bigger incision
If need be. Yeah.
So don't be
So
surprised.
I was told that they have some way of checking, like almost like ultrasound to find out. If
They might, because I feel like they told me, like, this is where your incision would be. This is what it would look like. So I think.
They did do the ultrasound.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do scans, but even Michelle said she woke up from surgery with it being in a different place than she expected. Does
The right
something
kidney,
happen?
but-
Yeah.
So
How
there's a
long
risk.
does it take from like start to finish? Like you decided and then to the having the surgery? Was it like over a year?
For me, it was, no, it was like from, I started in my March, I think, was when I had my first appointment. And then May is when I found out. And then July is when I had the surgery.
Oh, that was quick.
So it was pretty quick. In the big picture, I was like, why is this taking so long? Because you're waiting, you go in like say March and you're waiting till May to hear anything. But I don't know about
But it can be over a year for
Yeah.
some people.
Well, it's a little different situation because the recipient had to wait 6 months. But after that 6 months, I started testing in October. We found out the week after Thanksgiving, and then donated the 2 days after Christmas.
So, yeah.
And I submitted the paperwork in December, had the phone call in January, all the tests done in January, February. And I found out the end of February that I could donate. So it was a quick, to really, it was like 4 or 5 weeks once I was talking and meeting. And then we waited to have surgery until August because that is what worked for both me and my recipient. I could have done it right away.
Anybody has done it out of state?
I've known out-of-state folks that have come here to donate.
Yeah, my actual recipient actually lives in Illinois and came here to Froedtert to be part of the paired exchange.
The support groups that I'm sure many of us are on Facebook, you hear other stories of other transplant centers, but I don't know anybody personally who's donated out of state.
You hear some people going home the same day. I was like, man, I couldn't stand up
Right?
same day. I don't know how that happens.
Right.
It's usually females that heal quicker than guys, it seems like, on those Facebook groups.
Is there any, being post office, is there anything you would do, knowing what you know now, anything you would do differently to prepare or educate yourself on, or just kind of get in order before surgery?
I had to lose 20 pounds before surgery to
Okay.
help you do that. So I actually lost 30 just by exercise and eating right and drinking more water and
Okay,
not as much coffee. And
okay.
so, but no,
But did you all have your own insurance then? So you're not like self-employed or anything like that?
no, I work for the district.
Yeah, I have insurance, but the recipient's insurance covered everything. So actually, like for me with the paired exchange, Michelle's insurance covered everything for me.
But it said before, if you have to go out of state, then it's not covered.
Travel expenses.
Well, I will tell you, I have heard going to conferences that there are some centers that not 100% of the donor costs get covered by the recipient's insurance. I think if there is something at our center that doesn't get paid by the recipient's insurance, our center eats the cost of that and makes sure our donors don't have to pay for it. Not all centers work that way.
You have to remind them every time you check in someplace that you're a living
Yes.
donor, and that you don't need to tell them your insurance card or
Yes.
and show an insurance card.
You do?
No, you don't.
You shouldn't have to, but some people will just give it to them instead of
Yeah.
reminding them. And so, but I always tell people, if you get a bill, you need to let us know because you're not responsible.
Yeah.
Did anyone have any out-of-pocket expenses?
No, I live in Kenosha, so it wasn't
Just the travel.
just to travel.
Yeah.
And for me, I worked for a large organization at the time, so I did qualify for FMLA. So at that time, with that organization, 60% of my salary was covered, and my lost wages, my recipient actually was financially able to cover those differences. So I was very lucky in that regard, and that's legal for him to cover the difference of lost
See, now,
wages.
that's where we're getting conflicting. Someone's saying that it is and it isn't.
So they can pay those expenses and that's it.
Yeah,
So you kind of have to, you should kind of keep a little paper trail in case anyone's questioning. They can pay, recipients can pay for your travel and lodging expenses, unpaid time off of work. They can't just write you a blanket check though for
right.
$5,000 and say thanks for
Oh,
sharing your
right.
kidney.
Right.
That
That's like
cannot
paying
be done.
for, yeah, okay.
So you have to know the law and you have to know.
How do you do if you're self-employed though? I mean, I don't punch in, I don't punch out, I'm always on. I mean, how does that?
As far as somebody like reimbursement of your
it's-
salary,
Yeah,
I would say kind of taking what an average pay would be like. You know, I'm sure, you know, if you're somewhere, if you don't get work, you know, like it's per job and it all depends and everything varies, you know, kind of take a look at what your taxes are and kind of, or figure it out from that way. On average, how much would I be making during this time?
I'm more concerned about the time off. For me is a big deal.
And that would be something that the team is going to address with you if you go through the evaluation process, because as the social worker, you know, that's my job to make sure you're covered and have expenses taken care of. Because if you don't, then maybe donation is not right for you at this time, because the bills are going to come whether you're getting paid or not. And so, you know, not all recipients can afford to pay for those costs. There are some foundations that help out, but they're very limited as far as unpaid time off of work. Most of it's for travel and lodging expenses. So for people who are going to need to have a significant portion of their pay covered, you may have to fundraise for it to make sure those costs are
Yeah, I don't know if
covered.
that's that big of a deal. I was just asking more than anything about how that works. And I've heard different things. And so when you're, typically from my way I am, if I hear two different things, I'm like, okay, now
What's the real?
I don't want to find out too late that it's like, oh, I meant this one. And you're like, oh boy.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about, like I said, being educated, knowing what you know.
there is a bill before Congress in Washington DC that the Kidney Foundation is really supporting to make sure that people are able to take time off and that their insurance doesn't become a problem afterwards. So we have a couple of our senators and congressmen are supporting it and a couple who haven't. So if you take one of these things and get in touch with your congressperson and tell them that you want them to support that bill.
Well, that's one of the questions I had was, I mean, things can change with pre-existing conditions in terms of what they're going to do at the federal level.
Correct.
You know, and let's just assume that they don't change it. So this would be considered a pre-existing condition.
Yes, it is. As the law is written today, it doesn't impact your ability to get health insurance.
Right.
And so that is a conversation that I have frequently
So they
during
can charge
the
me more if
evaluation
I'm a smoker,
process.
they can charge me more if I'm overweight, they can charge me more for a number of different self-inflicted
But
health things, but they can't charge me more if I've donated a kidney.
as the law is written today, that is correct.
Even though that's
They
kind of a
cannot charge you,
self-inflicted thing.
they
You
cannot
really
charge
think
you
about it.
more, they cannot deny you health care coverage because you are a donor. Now, again, if the law changes in the future, I can't guarantee that's going to be the way it is the rest of your life, but that is the way the law is written today. Life insurance is different. Life insurance companies can deny you or charge you more for a pre-existing condition. So I always encourage people to get their life insurance in place before they donate.
But if you donate, was that going to have a problem with life insurance?
Usually life insurance companies are only checking your health, you know, when you're getting a policy in place or if you're changing your policy, if you're wanting to update. So I always encourage you to look long-term and get a plan in place that's going to meet your needs and have it done before you donate.
I was looking for additional at the time of donation and I was denied by Northwestern Mutual, and obviously I already have policies with them, but to add additional I was denied. But a couple of weeks ago they started sending me new forms to add. I was like, oh, they might have forgotten. So I was like, I should probably go on in and increase this a little bit here.
And don't tell them that's the reason you're looking
Right,
for life
right.
insurance either, because you're not a donor until you have the surgery. So they don't need to know that's the reason you're going in to get a policy.
And that my husband knows our guy, so he knew I was donating. So we were like, oh, this didn't work out in my favor here to have a guy, but
Thing is, we're we're about 10, 15 years on the road, you guys are all like, you're like, I'm 32 now, like, oh, I'm double that, so I mean, I'm not double, but I mean, when you get older, you guys are concerned about what might happen because of the surgery? Or anything like that?
Part of your testing that you go through, they I don't know all the technical terms, but they do check to make sure that your longevity of living with one kidney is okay. Like basically that day worth of testing is just checking to make sure you're healthy enough and that your kidneys specifically are healthy enough, and all those vials of blood that they take, so that part of it, I kind of just figured, I like you said, you left it in the hands of the medical world, and I thought like, well, if they say I'm good, all should be fine. But
And it's what
we
you do
also-
afterwards too, the hydration and what you eat, not over sodium and not taking NSAIDs. It's just making sure that the afterwards is not just for 5 years, it's for the rest. So.
Yeah. And the team is very honest about the risks to you. And so they go through those pretty clearly. I've had people say that they feel like the team is convincing them to not donate
Yeah.
because of all the risks that we share with people.
yeah, they
Because we
but it's
want
good
you
that
to
you're
be
informed.
well informed and you're making that decision and still choosing to donate despite all the risks that you have. And they will go through those longevity risks with you. And so depending on what your prior history is and how those labs are looking, that conversation is going to be personalized to what they're seeing in your medical history and your labs. And so, I will tell you, when you take a look at our numbers that we review compared to how many people call in to donate versus how many people we go through the full evaluation to how many people actually are able to donate, it's really astounding. We turn a lot of people away because it's not in their best interest.
Based on
They're
what-
based on their health. Well, and there's there can always be other issues too. If, from my perspective, I also look at mental health and drug and alcohol abuse and legal issues and financial issues. If there are things that are going to make your recovery unsuccessful from those perspectives, those are also things that can rule you out as a donor. But I will tell you, just the first phone call, so many people don't even make it through the first phone call because there's something in their medical history on, you're automatically, you can't donate. Because we want to make sure we're not doing any harm to our donors. Obviously, it's a surgery, we can't make any guarantees, but the team is very conservative and does their best to try to minimize those risks to donors as much as possible.
So some people drop out because of their own personal
Yes.
things. They find out it takes longer, or there could be 100. Everybody has their own reasons.
Yep.
But as far as, I'm just wondering how many people are weeded out just based on their physical aspects. 50%.
I don't know the numbers because when we look at the data in the meetings that I sit in, they don't say why they're ruled out. It just kind of shows how many we've ruled out. So I don't know the reason.
I was just
why.
kind of curious, just
Yeah.
out of the general population,
I
how
would
many
say-
people would be able to donate? 50%, 70%.
And most of them get ruled out due to medical reasons. And some people, once they start the evaluation process, we don't hear from them. And we don't hound people because we don't want to pressure them into something they're not interested in doing. So if they don't call us back, we do a good faith effort.
I wasn't
but-
counting that. And then
Right.
there's obvious reasons if somebody's morbidly obese or
Yep.
they have cancer, they have, you
Those
find
are things that would
somebody,
automatically rule people out.
Yeah.
Yep.
if they've
People
had
found out they
cancer.
only have one kidney,
Yeah.
There you
Yep.
go.
so.
Yeah. If you're diabetic,
So that-
all of it automatically is done.
I guess, there'd be a lot of ones that would cut a lot of people out.
I have a couple of friends that said they only have one kidney, found out when I was 20 years old. A few of them.
Seriously.
Yeah. And that's why you can live as a donor, because some people live with
I
one
never
kidney and
realized that.
never know it until they
Something happens.
need a scan and hey, look at this, there's only one kidney in there.
Well, how late can you donate age-wise?
Every
I'm
center.
sure there's not a cutoff date.
Well, some centers do have cutoffs. Every center is different on what their requirements are. Froedtert does not have an age cutoff. We really look at your current health and your health history to determine whether it's safe or not for you to donate. But obviously, the older you are, the more likely you are to have some sort of medical illness that is going to make things more complicated or more risky.
And what about the donor organ? Is that affected by how old the person is? I mean, is a younger one going to last longer?
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
So when I was going through the process and they talked about the paired exchange, they did say, obviously you have a young 30-something-year-old kidney. We would make sure that we would be getting a kidney around that same age to give to Michelle if it wasn't my actual one, which was great to hear because I didn't think about that until they said that does make a difference. So, yeah. Because for some recipients, depending on the need for, a new kidney, they might have to have another surgery in their lifetime for another kid, so.
yeah. What, so you said before, like, are you talking like in the 70s or 80s or?
I've seen people on Facebook that donate in the 70s.
Yeah, as I say, it doesn't happen very often as possible. I don't think I've ever seen someone in their 80s donate.
Yeah, I'm surprised when you talk to family how they're like, don't donate blood, take baby steps or something, which I did then.
You
But
can donate blood too. That's also life-saving.
But 6
Yeah.
months. 6 months after? Is it 6 months?
Oh, before you can
No,
donate?
I mean after you donate your kidney, it's like I think 6 months you have to wait or something like that before you
Oh.
donate blood.
Oh, that I don't know that
I think that's
statistic.
what it was.
That was for me, it was 6 months.
Stop donating stuff. Donate part of your liver too, but it's a lot harder.
That I heard is harder actually of a match than like a kidney.
It is. And the recovery for
harder,
recipients
yeah.
is a lot more challenging, or for the donors, it's a much harder recovery than a kidney donor.
And clearly you have a decision to make because I think a lot of people I talk to that are living donors, and myself included, there were a lot of people who said, don't do it. People in the medical community that are family members, like you're just putting yourself at risk and you just need to weigh those odds. And all of the education that I received and the research that I did and people that I spoke with that have lived year-long lives with one kidney with no issues and they're taking care of themselves, I felt that I was a candidate for that life. And I made that choice to say I'll take the risk to make sure that Mr. Hanusa has a life with his daughter and grandkids. Personal choice for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of people who say.
how old was he when he?
So he's now 70, so he was 65 at the time of donation.
Yeah, I heard one person say, well, why would you do it there? It's way too old anyway.
Right.
And I thought, well, I'm not that far away, dude.
You also have to, so like the recipient that got my actual kidney, I didn't realize until we met and we shared our stories, but she had been on dialysis. So she suffers from kidney disease. So and it's a family thing. So there's a lot of people in her family. So her kidneys were gone and she was on dialysis. And obviously my point of donating a kidney was to help Michelle not get to that point. She wasn't there yet, but it was coming. And I didn't know much about dialysis, but hearing Lori is the person that got my kidney, hearing her story of dialysis, she was on it for like 7 months, right? It sounded awful. It sounded horrific. Like it reminded me of somebody going through chemo with cancer. Like she was tied to this process in the morning and the night. And she'd maybe feel good for a couple hours the next day. But then, the rest of her day was awful. And then again, she was tied to this dialysis process for how much time at night, again in the morning, just awful. She even made a comment about how at one point in this whole debacle, she said, I have 2 grown kids. I've lived my life. Like, maybe this is it. Like, maybe I don't need to. And like hearing that, like, and I choke up because I didn't realize it was that bad. I was looking out for my friend, and to think that like I saved her life, not even thinking about that. She has such a better life now. She's talked about how she's just a normal person. She is not tied to dialysis. She feels amazing. Like that really hit me. And I didn't know that until after I donated. So I think the impact that you have is pretty pretty intense and you might not even realize it. So you have to look at that too. Like, is your recipient is going through dialysis? If they are, like, wow, it's an awful thing. If they haven't gotten to dialysis yet, like, will you be able to help them avoid that? So for me, that was a pretty powerful thing to find out that she kind of at one point was like, maybe this just isn't worth it anymore, like, to continue this. And so I don't know, that was just kind of amazing. So yeah.
Really good questions to consider.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Good talking to you.
Yeah, I spend hours on these things, so
Oh,
you
yeah,
have
yeah,
to look.
You have to look at the slides for a few more
So we have a
minutes.
program next week that's on healthy eating habits. We have a program on the 19th of November about getting older with Transplant. We have a couple of run walks that are fundraisers for the National Kidney Foundation. One of them is in, oh, these are backwards. One of them is in July, one of them is in May. And we have a little sheet up here that tells you how you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all those things. And I'm sorry, Michelle, I thought I had a Living Donors Together in here, but I do have a.
Oh, I had it up there. So everyone who has a sheet has it.
Is there your contact?
Thank you.
information?
Take the stuff-
Very, very much.
Take the stuff you're
Mike,
glad.
will you?
Thanks for coming.
Take the
I put this
evaluation.
to you.
Here, I can give you my card. I have, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I feel like we've maybe met at a different event. Were you at any other kidney foundation? That's,